All right, buckle up, boyos. You're about to get information. A lot of people, or at least two people or something, were asking about early game paths. So let's talk about early game paths really quick. Okay. There are several things that go into pathing with Evelyn. I guess the first thing that I should talk about is the fact that Evelyn can virtually start anywhere and go anywhere because her ability to take camps is insane. Between her W, Q, and E, she just murders camps relentlessly. It's very easy, and her passive keeps her fairly healthy. So if we're just talking plainly about camps, you can do whatever the fuck you want. All right, just make sure that you're doing them efficiently, which generally means you kite rates a little bit, and everything else you face tank and deal damage to it as fast as you can. With buffs, Gromp, with buffs and Gromp, you can kite back a little bit to dodge auto attacks if you know how to do that. If you don't, you can practice to try and get better at that to save some HP, but that's about it. So Evelyn can begin. She can start wolves, blue, red, or wraiths. Any of those are going to be okay. I would suggest not starting topside buff because I feel like it's just slower than starting topside little camp. But I digress. Hello, Eve. 10,000. Hello. So what you really need to if you do not sub, you cannot continue watching. He's kidding, by the way. Okay, so that's not the hard part about picking your path with Evelyn. That's the easy part. Now, here comes the hard part. The enemy jungle is what you really have to worry about, because Evelyn's weakness is not dealing with the camps, but dealing with the other champions in the early game. Okay? So the first thing that you should ask yourself upon entering the game is how much of a threat is the enemy jungler, and what will the enemy jungler do? If the enemy jungler is like a Gragas, then you don't really have to worry about him too much because Gragas doesn't clear that fast. If he invades you, he can't really steal camps that fast. So if you do somehow find yourself in the same place as the enemy Gragas, it's pretty easy to just walk away and go do another camp somewhere, whether it be in his jungle or in your jungle. But if you're up against somebody like Graves, then you have to be much more careful about what you do, because if you find yourself in the same side of the jungle as Graves, you're in a lot of trouble because you wasted time to walk there, and Graves takes camps very quickly. So he will steal your jungle, and then by the time you make it to his side of the jungle, he will just go there and stop you from taking his side of the jungle, and then things are bad. Rammus is a heavy early game ganker, but not a very heavy invader. So there are three types of champions. There's the fighters, there's the farmers, and then there's the useless ones. So when we talk about useless ones, it's going to be things like Sejuani, Fiddlesticks, I don't know, a million other things that just doesn't go in the jungle. So if it's not a fighter or not a farmer, it's gonna be a useless person. Kha'Zix is both a fighter and a farmer, and those guys are scary. Rek'Sai is more of a fighter. So basically, what I'm talking about is what is their potential for killing people and how quickly do they farm. For example, Shyvana is a perfect example of a farmer and not a fighter because she clears camps so fast, but she has a hard time of killing people because she has to walk up to them. She doesn't have very good tools to walk up to them. She can't slow them or anything like that. Kayn is another example of a farmer and not a fighter because he can do a lot of damage over time, but it's not enough to fight champions very easily in the early game. So Is Rammus a fighter or useless? He's a fighter. He has very good ganks because he has a lot of movement speed and CC, so he's a very good fighter. So when you load into the game, you have to decide what the enemy jungler can do. If they're a farmer, you have to worry about them invading you, stopping you from jungling your own jungle, and then stopping you from jungling their jungle. So meaning restricting how many camps you can get. And against those kind of junglers, the first thing you have to make sure that happens is that you are able to secure at least 6 camps in the jungle, meaning either your entire jungle side or a scuttle crab in 5 of these. So at most you can lose half of your jungle, and you kind of like you can split the jungle. You can split the jungle in half. If the enemy jungle gets these camps, it's fine for you to take these camps. If the enemy jungler takes all of these camps, it's okay for you to take all of these camps. But it's a little bit more dangerous. Anytime you have to go into the enemy jungle, you're putting yourself in danger's way. And we'll talk about that in a second. So if the enemy jungler is a farmer, you have to... Kayn has to fight or he will be useless. Once Kayn hits level 6, he can fight and stuff, but by then we don't care anymore because we've passed our weak point. So that's kind of the reason that Kayn isn't an insane champion, is because he has to fight to become useful, but he has a hard time fighting in the early game. But whatever, we don't care about Kayn, we care about Evelynn. So if you're up against a farmer, what you have to do is you have to make sure that they can't invade you very easily. So if you think that the enemy farmer is going to be starting on top side of jungle, you generally want to start on top side of jungle as well, because you want to make sure that they can't, from Scuttle Crab, invade your jungle. So if you're up against, let's say, Graves, right? And Graves often, a lot of farmers often, Lee Sin is more of a fighter than he is a counter jungler farmer. Okay, so Graves and a lot of other farmers often like to start red into Krugs into Scuttle Crab. So the easiest way to counter this is starting wolves into blue into Scuttle Crab, because you will do it faster than they will do red Krugs Scuttle Crab. And this kind of cuts off what what options they have to go towards from here. All you have to do is maybe ward bottom side river, and then do this, and then go to your top side. And now they can't chase you to your top side, so they can't cut you off from farm. And they kind of have to make the walk of shame over here and kind of like take a suboptimal path, getting the rest of their camps. Against farmers, the biggest thing to note is that you're not trying to cut off their farm, okay? You're not trying to cut off their farm, so you don't want to do this. You don't want to have the enemy farmer go red, Krugs, and then, you're like right here, you just finished Gromp, you have 3 camps, he has 2. And then you try to go and invade him here because you like see him here or something, and then you try to steal his blue really quick, but he's like chasing you, and then he tries to fight you or something. You don't want to do this, because against farmers, it is good enough to just have half of the jungle. And if you give them an inefficient jungle route, that's good enough to survive the early game and become more useful than they are. Okay. All right. I'm saying a lot of things. I hope I'm not rambling too much. So yeah, if they start bottom side, then this is a really easy way to counter them. If you start bottom side and you see them maybe through a ward or something that they are top side because they actually started blue, then it's a little bit more complicated. You might have to go into their rates and take their rates and do their top side jungle or whatever. But anyway, all the things that you are doing and working towards is splitting the jungle in half. Against farmers, that's your main objective. just split the jungle in half, get at least 6 camps on your first rotation, and then you're good. Do whatever you need to do after that. Take whatever camps are available to you. If there's more than 6, go for it. If there isn't, put some wards down. Check to see if you can gank. Farmers often are not fighters, so ganking isn't as dangerous as it is against fighters. What size matches do I have? A queen. Wolves, Blue Scuttle, Grump, top camp. No, you do not. Okay, so yeah, you do not go back to Grump. That's one of the big things. If you do Wolves, Blue, Grump, Wolves, Blue, Scuttle Crab versus a farmer, you do not go back towards your Grump, because now this gives the opportunity for the enemy farmer to then go up and beat you to the top side of your jungle. You want to always keep them on your heels, but make sure they're not fast enough to interrupt you. So it's much more beneficial for you to go to your topside jungle and finish your rates by the time that they're like over here or something, and then do your red by the time they're here. And then if they do try to invade you, they're just wasting so much time that it doesn't matter, even if they do get this red. But the proper thing to do when you're invaded, by the way, is to reset the buff or the camp if you can, and make them waste time. Grow. Your laners will always be able to help first if they're not bad. So you want to maximize the amount of time that the enemy has to waste in your jungle to give your laners enough time to react and come kill them. So if this kind of thing happens, you just surround him and you kill him. Despite you being weak, you have your allies to punish him for doing something stupid, like going in and like being late to your camps. It's different if you know, if they are early here and you like arrive as they're like halfway through taking your red buff or something. This is catastrophic. You know, if you have an enemy like Lee Sin Graves or something like that, a strong farmer, well, not Lee Sin. Lee Sin really tries to kill you by going to your jungle, but whatever. So if you have them go something like this and you meet them here, this is like a very big failure on your part. And at that point, you have to take your rates if you can, and then double back to his jungle and take his rates if you can to equal out the amount of camps that you have. So, okay. Anyway, that's how you play versus junglers that farm a lot. You have to make sure that this kind of thing happens and that you will be able to actually take enough camps to stay relevant in the game. And then as a secondary thing, you put down wards and you go and gank other lanes. You go to the bot lane, if whatever. Like, if opportunities show themselves, you go gank it. You guys, that's a whole other discussion about how to tell if you can gank or not. Like this might be gankable, but this might not be gankable, you know? Whatever. So that's against farmers. Against fighters, like Rek'Sai, Lee Sin, Graves will work too. Camille, crazy fighter. Nidalee. I'm sure there's some other ones that I'm forgetting. Whatever. Champions that are really good at killing other champions. It's a little bit different. So against those kind of champions, you really only have to worry about them appearing in the same side of jungle as you. And if they do, you just run away. And you really want to worry about them being able to kill your laners. Alright? Yeah, Rammus. Sure, Rammus will fall under that category. People don't really play on Rammus too much, so I forget about him. Oh, Master Yi is another farmer, by the way. That's probably going to be a popular guy. So, against people like that, what you really want to think about is where are they going to be able to gank, right? So you got to look at your matchups. If you have laners that are super immobile or laners that really want to push up a lot, you know that those guys are going to be in trouble. So it's your job to kind of try and make sure they don't die. That means you want to put down wards over there to make sure they don't die. You want to perhaps even like be behind their tower or something like that to make sure that they don't get dove and whatnot if somebody is coming there. But basically, you have a little bit more leeway with what you can do because the guys that are really good at fighting, they can't cut you off of your farm. So you have a little bit more options there. You can choose to farm up your jungle, and generally what that will do is it will increase your level relative to the enemy jungler, which means you'll hit level 6 faster and then you'll be more powerful than them at that point. Or you could try to do early game ganks to kind of match them and get leads for your laners at the same time as they get leads for their laners. The biggest thing to mention there, though, is that the enemy fighters, you don't want to gank the same place that they are ganking, because the worst thing that you could do against an enemy fighter is take a 2v2. If this kind of thing happens, let's say like this kind of thing, where like you go from here and you go like this, and then the enemy fighter is on your heels and he goes like this is a losing situation, because now these two guys will be able to turn on you and kill you. In the early game, you can't actually fight toe to toe, and your laner most of the time won't be strong enough to make up for your weaknesses, and you will die. So there are more options, but also more risks when it comes to playing against fighters. You don't want them to get very ahead early on, which means that you want to prevent their ganks, and you want to punish their ganks too. So let's say that the enemy fighter does something like this. Let's say it's Xin Shao. He takes red buff, and then he goes and he takes blue buff, and let's say you started at Wraiths, okay? So he takes red buff, he takes blue buff, and then maybe like a Wraith or something, and then goes to Scuttle Crab and hits level 3. And you warded up here so you can kind of see him. You take Wraiths, red, and Krugs. That's something that I would often do. And this would be a normal thing to see. So like you take 3 camps, he took 3-ish camps. So he's like around here right now while you are finishing Krugs, right? So what he's going to go do is he's going to go look for people to kill, right? And what you should be doing at this point is one of two things. If you see this guy being low, you might have to go support him, make sure he doesn't die. That's pretty rare. Usually you don't have to do that. You can, at this point, go do one of two things. If you see him going top lane, you can actually go mid lane and try to gank mid lane really quick while he's here. Or you can try to go and invade his bottom side jungle while he's like somewhere around here, and take his Wraiths and his Krugs to make yourself more powerful and hit level 6 faster than he does. So maybe he gets a kill here, maybe he doesn't, but you are punishing him for going top lane regardless, which means making plays in the bot lane, or invading his bot side jungle, or having placed wards top lane to prevent him from ganking or whatever. And I think that about covers it. Plus, I've already been talking for so long, I feel like I've probably lost like 1 million people at this point. So I'll just say that that's it. To summarize, Evelynn has a lot of options available to her in the... Is it worth to steal an enemy buff and then flash away? As in, is a buff worth more than my flash? Not unless it's like the first one or something like that. No. Generally speaking, one camp is not worth your flash. Because your flash can mean a kill or a death prevented. So that's 300 gold. I wouldn't you shouldn't even be like at the same place as the enemy jungler. You shouldn't be at the same camp as your enemy jungle. Like, generally speaking, that would mean like in the enemy jungle, or if he comes to your jungle, like I said earlier, you have to try to reset it. Don't try to contest camps. Try to keep them healthy and just dissuade the enemy jungler from staying there. Make him run away. Yes, Rammus is the turtle guy. To summarize, Evelynn has a lot of paths available to her. She can start wolves, blue, wraiths, or red, depending on what she really wants to do. If she's fighting against a person that can invade and take her camps very easily, she has to be careful to not lose so many camps that she becomes crippled and useless in the early mid game. But if she's playing against a jungler that is really bent on killing people, then she just has to make sure that while that early game jungler is getting advantages in one side of the map, she is punishing him on other sides of the map by taking away his farm or ganking one of his other lanes. To do that, what you need to do is try to figure out where the enemy jungler will start, depending on what kind of jungler he is, and then either put down early wards to prevent the early ganks, or try to just have a better path, a quicker path than them, to cut off them from counter jungling you, or to make their path somewhat inefficient and make it so that you are getting camps at a faster rate than they are. Yeah, that's about it. Versus aggressive guys, punish them other places. Make sure, try to make it so that their ganks don't work. Against farming guys, counter junglers, try to just make a sneaky path that will prevent their plant invades and make it so that you get more camps per minute than they do. Hope that answers those questions. I need to make this description that I just did into a YouTube video, into like a guide, because I feel like what I just did is Water Walking and Gathering Storm. Both are really good. Water Walking is for early game, Gathering Storm is for late game. I'm currently running Gathering Storm, but I was running Water Walking for months, so up to you. It's not gonna make or break your game. What I just talked about is like one half of early game decision making. The other half is actually looking at lanes and looking at the specific enemy junglers and actually choosing what order to do camps in. That is a little bit more like nitty gritty, and I don't want to go into like a 4-hour description right now of every single champion and whatnot. So yeah, but I gave you kind of like the tools for figuring it out by yourself.